Welcome to Dark Ideas. Thanks for tuning in. Today's topic, do ghosts exist? This is a question that has plagued the human mind for ages. What happens when we die? Do we simply cease to exist, or is there some part of us that moves on? And if so, can that existence wind up trapped here, intentionally or otherwise? Unfortunately, there's no clear-cut answer, mainly because there's no genuine way to answer it. Do ghosts exist? Well, we don't know. Science has come a long way, but there's still a lot of things we can't explain, mainly because they're not testable. The scientific method is great, but when you're dealing with intangible things, it becomes a lot harder to control for variables, test, and repeat results. Ghosts are a prime example of a widespread phenomenon that can't be tested, at least not with the technology we currently possess. Regardless, we still see people time and time again posing extraordinary claims of the supernatural. Ghosts are a major Hollywood cash grab. You see them in movies, on television, in books. A few of you may have even heard a ghost story from a friend or neighbor. Maybe if you're lucky, you've had an experience yourself. While there's no doubt that ghosts exist within the realm of creative fiction, the real question that seems to be on everyone's mind is whether or not these phantoms transcend the silver screen and walk among us in our world, in a manner of speaking. Sadly, we may never know. However, it is fun to speculate. The question is not whether or not ghosts exist, but rather whether or not you, as an individual, believe in them. For me, I tend to be skeptical of just about everything, and when it comes to topics that require you to take it on faith, I have a hard time taking them seriously. Ghosts are a phenomenon that has been propagated throughout history, possibly even longer. The idea that a person can leave their body after death and continue to walk the earth for whatever reason seems to fulfill two purposes. The first ties into the fear of death that most humans have. It would make sense from a biological standpoint that a species would be adverse to its own destruction. Fear keeps you safe long enough to pass on your genes. This goes for a multitude, if not all, living creatures, with the exception of maybe plants, but don't quote me on it. Nevertheless, people fear dying, and the thought of being able to somehow cheat death has always been a powerful theme. Just look at religion. The second purpose for ghost stories, and probably the most obvious, is to scare the ever-living shit out of people, mainly children and sometimes gullible adults. This theme has persisted right up until today and will probably continue well into the future. I mean, who honestly doesn't like a good ghost story, right? People enjoy being scared, but they enjoy it when they know that it's safe. So, do ghosts exist? Or more specifically, is there a good reason to believe ghosts exist? Well, if we're going to address this question, the very first thing we need to do is define ghost. When most people think of ghosts, they think of sheets, dead people, unfinished business, but there's a lot more to it than Demi Moore and Unchained Melody. When defining ghosts in general, there are three main categories that are most commonly referenced, at least from what I've seen. These categories include the recurring haunting, the intelligent haunting, and the poltergeist. Nifty little acronym there. Now, there are other classifications, but for the purpose of this video and the others that will follow it, I'm going to focus primarily on these three. Obviously, not everyone out there grew up in the occult, so let's define each one of these. I think it's worth mentioning that, like any kind of cryptid or urban legend, there are a lot of different interpretations. When I say define, I'm going to be giving a broad definition of how I understand each of these entities based on my own background and what I've experienced. These are subjective opinions, got it? So with that out of the way, let's start with the most popular interpretation, the intelligent haunting. This is your Casper kind of ghost. An intelligent haunting is most often described as someone, now we're presuming human here, who's passed on through one means or another and for some reason chooses to stay behind or is trapped within this plane of existence. Intelligent spirits, as the name suggests, are allegedly both aware that they are dead and capable of interacting with their environment as well as objects and sometimes even people. They can be either benign or malevolent. Popular theories suggest that these kinds of hauntings arise from violent deaths or suicides. It's also suggested that some of these spirits actually stay behind because of a personal attachment, usually to an object or a location. An old man dies in his home and his spirit winds up wandering the halls of the house he refused to leave behind. The key point of an intelligent haunting, however, is that the spirit in question must be aware of its surroundings, at least to some degree. This brings us to our second category, the poltergeist. A lot of people may be thinking, well, what's the difference? While there are a lot of similarities between the two, poltergeists are unique for two reasons. The first, and possibly the most obvious, is that they move things. Poltergeist activity can range anywhere from sounds to objects being moved or thrown, all the way up to people actually being assaulted. There have been cases of people suffering from scratches, kicks, and even bites. The second thing that separates a poltergeist from its intelligent counterpart is that while hauntings in general tend to revolve around objects or locations, poltergeist activity is often centered around people. This is why moving from a haunted location usually results in the ghost staying where it is. But moving from a poltergeist intrusion is like stepping in dog shit. It's attached to you. It should be noted that activity like sounds and objects tipping over does not necessarily indicate a poltergeist. Intelligent hauntings have been known to display this kind of behavior, and sounds are also associated with recurring hauntings as well. Most of the times, a ghost is classified as a poltergeist when it gets violent. Poltergeist actually translates to noisy ghost, and is often associated with violent entities, and little girls getting sucked into closets. Ironically, this segues nicely into what could be considered a fourth type of ghost, although I don't want to touch too much on that right now. This fourth type is what's known as an inhuman spirit. Now, I think the topic of inhuman spirits is fascinating, and because of that, it deserves its own series. Eventually, I'll be doing an entire segment dedicated to the idea, but for the purpose of this video, we're going to be defining ghosts as humans, so I'm going to hold off on that. Moving right along, our last category is the recurring haunting. This one is unique, and it stands out from just about any others for one reason. It is strictly environmental. Recurring hauntings do not interact with anyone or anything other than their immediate environment as it was at the time of their initial death. For lack of a better term, it's a glitch in the Matrix, or déjà vu gone horribly wrong. A recurring haunting is a ghost that repeats the same action over and over again. Usually recurring haunts are associated with a violent death. A lot of times the recurring haunt will forever repeat its final moments. An example that comes to mind is the famous legend of the fleeing bride. A woman runs from her wedding day into the street and is hit by a 14-wheeler. Now she's doomed every night to flee from the chapel for all eternity. A recurring haunting cannot be interacted with. However, many people have claimed to have seen or videotaped this odd phenomenon. Unlike the other two, recurring hauntings are not violent, or rather, not violent toward the onlooker. Watching someone hang themselves over and over again could be considered violent, but you get my drift. There is one traditionally creepy thing about recurring hauntings, however, that's found its way into popular ghost fiction throughout the ages and still persists today. The notion that ghosts can walk through walls is contributed to from the recurring haunt. The reason for this is actually interesting and brings up questions regarding physics and space-time, but that's a different conversation. Anyway, recurring haunts have been known to walk right through walls, floors, and even ceilings. The reason for this is that what you are witnessing is the past. It's quite literally a movie reel trapped in time. Let's take the case of the Civil War soldier who walks through the wall of a haunted bed and breakfast in Gettysburg. This ghost has been reported to pace the hallway of a building that used to be a hospital before spontaneously stopping to walk straight through the wall of what today leads to a 3-story drop. However, during the time in which the soldier would have actually been there, the building had an extension on it, and the wall that our soldier seemingly walked through would have been a hallway. Because the image we're seeing now no longer lines up with the physical present, it appears as though the soldier went through solid matter. Although the time in which that moment took place, there was nothing barring his path. Now that we've defined our 3 main contenders, I'm going to focus on addressing the validity of each type of ghost and delve more into the various claims both for and against their existence. Stay tuned until next time.